Hey, what's up, guys? It's Mark Yoon. I'm bringing you another hopefully exciting video. So we had Mark Cerny talk about some of the specifications of the PlayStation 5, and I guess the main reason I'm making this video is I've seen a lot of YouTubers and people on Twitter misconstrue some of the specifications, or I guess it's better to say unrightfully compare them, like apples and oranges. So I wanted to give my thoughts and take on it, as well as go over a few of the details. And I just want you guys to know off the bat that I'm not downing the Xbox at all. In fact, I'm not low riding either of the consoles, because if there's good exclusives for the Xbox Series X, I'm going to get both also. But this is just about the release of the PlayStation 5 information, so I wanted to talk about that. Especially for some people, I'm not gonna name the specific YouTubers that I had a grievance with. I did unsubscribe from one of them that I have been a long-time subscriber to because of their take on it. It just seems that they don't understand the tech that's inside of the consoles, which is fine. I'm just gonna say it's Angry Joe, but I don't want to put this as a leverage or alienate anybody within my own personal community, because I just want things to be true. I always look for truth in claims, and I always test hypotheses with evidence, and that's basically what we've always done here. I admit when something doesn't go right, or we make predictions based on actual evidence. That's just what's been done here for over 2 years. So that being said, and getting out of the case, let's just start with some of the very specific connotations that were brought about from some of these people. First of all, Angry Joe was saying that PlayStation 5 is going to be weaker than the Xbox Series X, based on the fact that it is 10 teraflops as opposed to 12 teraflops. I obviously don't think he watched the entire 52-minute, hour-long Mark Cerny talk. It would be kind of hard to, because as some people that did watch it know, this was supposed to be in reference to their GEC for developer meeting. It wasn't necessarily supposed to be for consumers, but they did put it out there, so there are some good complaints about it being boring or whatever, because it was really tech heavy and didn't really show off any games or anything like that. But the biggest complaint is this teraflop thing that I've seen getting levied against it. In the, I guess, slide or TED Talk or keynote speech that you can see itself, Cerny was also talking about how they are working directly with AMD. It's got the same Ryzen 2 architecture that the Xbox Series X has, obviously, but it's built for the ground up in partnership specifically with their console. He also went into that teraflops can't be argued against just based on themselves, because the teraflops of the PlayStation 4 wouldn't even compare to the teraflops of a PlayStation 5, just because of the capacity and the transistors that are on each one. He said something, there's 62% more transistors per teraflop than there were as compared to the older technology in the PlayStation 4, so it can get greater results. The main thing that they were going for is the SSD, the boot up speed, which Microsoft is also touting, so I think both consoles are extremely powerful. I'm not really saying anything like that. I just think the nature of the reaction was a little off to me, and I understand it. You want to make a video, you want to have that visceral reaction, and I actually held off for a few hours because I would have probably had an angry rant as well. That's why I'm trying to just do this in a more level-headed and calm manner, and I'm not directly attacking anyone, but I just think some of these things should be brought to light a little bit more. With not only the game speeds, but the SSD also plays a role in what the GPU does, the computing power, how it processes things. He made a point that 825 gigabytes is not enough memory, because the Call of Duty games on current generation are getting up to 150 gigabytes. He is correct about that. However, the 825 dedicated storage, so it's probably a terabyte, but with everything that's being going to the other processes, it's going to be 825 gigabytes off the gate of available storage space. It's going to be a similar situation with the Xbox Series X. They just didn't talk about how much memory is being allocated towards the other parts of the partitions. But that's just more tech talk. So he was like, you're basically going to fill up your console with 8 games, but that's not how it works. Because this is an SSD, it works totally different than it would with a hard drive, especially like a solid state. Like this, the SSD is much faster, the processing is better, and the compression is also better because it's got priorities towards things. So not only are you getting faster loading times, and he was also talking about some pre-rendered loading, like there's going to be AI technology within it that loads textures and stuff like that on the fly that developers didn't even put into the game. The fact that the system is just going to run better as a whole, games are going to be compressed better. So he was mentioning that when you do an update patch or an update file, which is why some of these games were so large, especially on the PlayStation, that it would patch in that one part but create an entirely new file. So you would get the entire file with the patch applied to it as a new file on the structure itself. So obviously it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to take up a lot of space, and loading times are obviously going to be longer. But I'm saying that 825 gigabytes of dedicated SSD memory is not going to be the same as a terabyte hard drive would be externally plugged into like your PlayStation 4 or even the one that came in at factory. So since compression is a thing, that and the patches are going to be allocated just specifically without just refiling everything, that 150 gigabyte game that we would see on like something like a PlayStation 4 would be compressed down to maybe, let's say, an 80 or even like a 70 or 75 gig file, and the patches would be automatically applied without having to copy any files or waste any space, which he was talking about in Spider-Man 4. Mark Cerny was mentioning that there was over 400 files in a patch of just like a lamppost or a mailbox, and this took up unnecessary space, which really stopped developers from being as artful as they wanted to and made areas bland. These files are going to be compressed so that they run smoother and better on the actual adaptive technology, and they're going to also run better. But the file size is going to be smaller because it's an SSD. It's a dedicated SSD. Especially if you're someone like me who actually replaced your hard drive a long time ago on your PS4 with something that wasn't a Sony one. So I'm not saying that he was completely wrong in his assessment. I'm just saying that Angry Joe was missing a little bit of the nuances and how the technology actually works and how it would affect the system. But that's generally what he does. He makes an angry visceral reaction to what he sees, and he tries to play... I know his name is actually Joe Vargas, but he actually plays the average Joe consumer when it comes to reacting to certain things. I know he fancies himself a movie critic and whatnot too. I'm speaking specifically on video games. He is coming more of a place of, this is the average gamer, so this is what we are seeing, as opposed to what a developer or somebody that's in the know would see. I'm not claiming that I know more than him with this. I'm just talking about the specific instance. So when it comes to comparing all these things, the gigahertz processing speed, all that stuff, like, they're very much comparable, and the technologies, they may have different numbers, but they're also proprietary, so they're being made with the gaming consoles individually set in mind, so they do different things and prioritize different things and different functions, so they're going to run generally the same. The focus this time around is going to be obviously on 4K. I don't even know if that's completely necessary, but I think it's more necessary to run at a higher frame rate. So instead of getting like a solid 4K image with 30 frames per second, it should be like a 2K image with 60 frames per second consistently. I know Microsoft is pushing for 120 in certain instances, but we're not going to notice that much of a difference. Especially because the naked eye doesn't even see in 4K, but the TVs that we're using would also have to be supported and blah, blah, blah. You're not going to see that in like an average TV. But just getting back to some of their points, yes, the keynote speech was boring. It did feel like a TED Talk. Cerny did bring like very low energy because he was just matter-of-factly giving us information that the developers were supposed to digest, because it's going to be that on them to understand what this technology is, since it is proprietary. And they're going to take that and maybe utilize it with some functionality within the games. Just like if they didn't know that ray tracing was a part of it, or the AI functionality, then they're not going to develop that with that in mind. But now they can maybe alter and come up with new ideas of how to work with feedback or anything like that. Like the 3D sound was a great one that they were talking about. That's actually really exciting, especially when it comes to something like VR, and I am a headset user, so that does sound great. Backwards compatibility, Microsoft wins and takes the cake because they go fully backwards compatible. PlayStation is really pushing for their PlayStation Now program, which has PlayStation 2 and 3 games on it. We're not sure if it doesn't do it hardware-wise. It's really easy to emulate both of those consoles on this new technology, so I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't let the developers know, because it has nothing to do with the developers, and they are literally going to drop that information at a later date. Before we know, right now, he did say that the top 100 games are mostly going to play based on playtime at launch, PlayStation 4 wise. But for people that have multiple consoles, it's not really that big of a deal anyway, but the average consumer will definitely find that information useful. The only part that I would say that Sony is winning when it comes to this is Microsoft has a proprietary SSD external storage system, where that little slot in the back of the console, you can plug in your own little 1 terabyte, they said up to 1 terabyte Microsoft made card that they I forgot who they partnered with. I believe it's Seagate, but I'm not sure. But PlayStation is open to letting third parties consoles go into their actual hard drive that'll sync up with everything that's in the system and utilize the system's functionality to its fullest effect. But we need to wait until we find out which M2 SSDs will be available on aftermarket, because at that time the speeds need to keep up with what's currently in the hard drive of the PlayStation 5. So if you go ahead and pre-order something now, it might not be compatible, it might not fit inside of the driver, it might not be compatible with the BIOS even, and it might not even fit inside the drawer that's in the actual console itself, because some of them are beefier than others, and it's not like we get some standard size like we could with the PlayStation 4 with the 2.5-inch SATA format hard drives for laptops. So I'm going to bring this to a close. I don't want to keep rattling on too much. I just wanted to say that a lot of the information that's being put out there, take it with a grain of salt, and don't just take anybody that you watch at face value that they're 100% knowing what they're talking about, because some people don't understand the actual tech nuances of the things that are going on. Make a judgment for yourself. If there's a certain specific thing that you want to know more about, I would encourage you to research it yourself or reach out to somebody that you trust. But leave a comment in the comment section down below if you watched the entire show, or if you want me to post. I'll post the entire hour-long video if you want me to. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to bring it to a close right now. I hope you guys stay safe in the current climate. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.